Hello and welcome to episode 11 of The Blue Corner. I'm Mike, as always, one half of the Unknown Experts. So let's get down to it, the news. Let's see, first and foremost, we're getting word that the UFC is looking to, quote-unquote, strip Colby Covington of the interim welterweight belt he won at UFC 226 after he requested his unification bout with official champion Tyron Woodley to be pushed back beyond September for more training time. Now Darren Till has come forward saying, let's do it up. So it appears that Till will get the title shot against Woodley once Covington is stripped. That shot will take place in September at UFC 228, I believe in Moscow, Russia. The first ever event to be co-promoted with M1 Global. A crazy, unthinkable move. Years ago we would have never thought was possible after all of the things Dana White has said about Vladimir Finkelstein, the head of M1 Global, and a little too late, because we could have gotten Bellator after all this time, but he's in the, we'll get to it, but he's in the middle of the Bellator tournament at the moment. Courtney Casey Sanchez has stepped up to replace the injured Alexa Grasso versus Angela Hill, or as I call her, Angela Hill 2.0. Very different fighter since her The Ultimate Fighter 20 debut, where she lost to the eventual winner of the tournament in the first round, Carla Esparza, by a standing rear naked choke. Even though that fight doesn't show up on a record, since the early fights on The Ultimate Fighter are seen as exhibitions because of their 2 rounds. Hill also went on to win the vacant Invicta Fighting Championship strawweight belt. Former heavyweight champ Cain Velasquez, who's walking around as injured as ever, is training at the WWE Pro Wrestling Gym for some reason. Hopefully we'll get more news on that later. The PFL 4 event is taking place. PFL, formerly known as the World Series of Fighting, before being sold from Zuffa. It's currently happening at the Nassau Coliseum as I speak. In the 8 fights that have happened so far tonight, only 2 have gone to a decision, further showing that the PFL's format is truly helping provide motivation for finishes and risk-taking. I think it's a very smart move, and it kind of reminds me of Strikeforce's excitement and how guys were willing to go out there and take a chance. There's only 2 fights left on the card, so we'll see how that works out. Luke Rockhold mentioned that he almost head-kicked Brock Lesnar during the Daniel Cormier Pro Wrestling shoot promo at UFC 226, but had a moment where he remembered the infamous Diaz brother incidents, including the infamous Strikeforce Nashville brawl between Mayhem Miller and almost all of Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu team. And the lesser-known Elite XC brawl between KJ Noons, his father, and the Diaz brothers. There's a rumor traced back to Dana White that Max Holloway's medical issues is due to he overdosed on water during his weight cut, or his weight cutting process. My theory is, if that is the case, he probably got tagged while doing so he's probably sparring while cutting, which is not a good idea. And that's what caused these extreme concussion-like symptoms. There's other rumors out there, but this is the one that seems to have the most weight around it. Brian Ortega didn't receive any money whatsoever for his canceled UFC 226 featherweight title shot because, quote, he didn't do his job and we did, according to the UFC. Because on 4 days' notice, his title shot versus Max Holloway was turned into a place filler match versus Jeremy Stevens that he declined because, frankly, why risk the title shot? There's been guys who've had the shot, been a company man, stepped up, lost, and never got close to the title ever again. It should be noted that he said he not only did all his press obligations in English, but also did all of them again in Spanish, since he's bilingual. He said that he was there longer than any other fighter. So that's a whole nother problem and thing. It's not a good white for Dana White's image, to be frankly. Although I previously mentioned Junior Dos Santos versus Stipe Miocic 3, it appears that Ngannou may get Junior Dos Santos instead, seeing as he said as much, and if White doesn't have another tantrum and cut him in the meantime, we'll most likely get Ngannou versus Junior Dos Santos instead of Stipe versus Junior Dos Santos 3, which is currently tied at 1-1. It would be the rubber match. Speaking of white and tantrums, him and Shab quite publicly went on it on Instagram after Israel Stylebender misquoted what Shab was saying about the Gokensaki fight at 226, where Shab said, well, we were all thinking that Saki in the first fight, his UFC debut, got tagged and was lucky to get the finish and the win. In his second fight against Khalil Roundtree, he was less lucky, went out there and got TKO'd with a, I believe it was a left straight, and then follow up hammer fist. I mean, Shab made the obvious point that these K1 kickboxers, Lori kickboxers, are so used to having the defensive shell, the big 16 to 14 ounce gloves to cover up with, that the second you take that away, it's a whole nother story, and it can be problematic for them. So he was saying that someone told Israel Stylebender that he was talking about him because he was also a kickboxer turned MMA fighter, and he put a video out basically shaking his head at Shab's comments. White put a PS on there that Shab's a nobody, riding Joe Rogan's coattails in the comedy world, and Shab basically had enough and put him in his place. Throwing little jabs out there that he's never been a fighter. Just because you hang out with lions doesn't make you one, was the exact quote I think he used. He pretty much owned Dana through and through, and this is after already making other, not jabs, but just truthful statements on the Joe Rogan experience that White is doing the opposite of what a good promoter should do, like with the Francis Ngannou situation, where you have a guy who is clearly having a psychological issue and went out there for 15 minutes and barely was able to throw a punch. So there's clearly a psychological component to his problem after being touted as, oh, he's an egomaniac because he was a knockout artist and he seemed invincible, and then Miocic made him seem very invincible. After Ngannou only clipped him a few times in the first round, Miocic just wrestle-fucked him, and not in a boring way, but just in a very successful way. So he went from the precipice of greatness to just being another guy, another heavyweight on the roster with chinks in the armor. So instead of saying something supportive and saying that he'd come back, White threw him under the bus, saying, oh, he's an egomaniac, we may end up cutting him, all these things that White's been doing forever. But anyway, in our last piece of news, with the last Emperor is coming to Long Island. Fedor versus Sonnen is going to take place at the new Nassau Coliseum. And as we previously mentioned on the past couple of shows, it will happen the same weekend within 24 hours of the other Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix semifinal matchup, Ryan Bader versus Matt Mitrione, which will take place in Connecticut the day before, October the 12th, and Fedor versus Sonnen will be Saturday, October the 13th. So we finally have dates on those. Those are the headlines for today. I'm Mike, as always, one half of the Unknown Experts. I'll get back to you guys real soon with more news. It seems like something big's on the horizon. At least it feels that way regarding maybe McGregor and Habib or something else in the sport. But check us out on Facebook and Twitter as usual. And peace out, one love, and keep watching.